Call to order a special meeting for the normal local liquor commission. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus,
Here?
Mr. Fritzen,
Here.
Mr. McBride,
Here.
Mrs. Cummings,
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz, Mr. Preston, Mr. McCarthy,
Here.
The purpose of this special meeting is to grant a liquor license application to Fine Eats LLC, doing business as Swingers Grill at 1304 Cross Creek Drive in Normal. This is they're looking for a Class D all liquor on premises consumption, a Class H outdoor garden sidewalk cafe license. They are, this is a change of ownership. There's really no substantive change to the business.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen,
Aye.
Mr. McBride,
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz, Mr. Preston, Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. A Class D and Class H liquor license is granted to Fine Eats LLC. Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride,
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz, Mr. Preston, Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus,
Aye. We are
Mr. Fritzen.
Aye.
adjourned. Thank you. And we will start our regular meeting in about 2 minutes.
Are you? No, I didn't.
Sorry.
I'll let Pam do that.
Changing this?
Yeah, it matches the report.
Okay.
We bid that, and the bids came in way low. We thought we might be, we had 300,000, and we were nervous. Came in way low, so we had an extra 75, so we want the authority to supplement the contract with, at the same unit price.
Okay.
So that actually just reflects the report. We forgot to, when we changed the report, we didn't change that, so.
Cool.
Pretty straightforward, yeah. Well, if you had, then you'd know.
Then I would've caught it.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Thank you. They're here.
Everyone ready? Call to order a regular meeting for the normal town council for August 21st, 2017. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus.
Here?
Mr. Fritzen,
Here.
Mr. McBride.
Here.
Mrs. Cummings,
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Mr. Preston,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy,
Here.
We'll begin with a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There is no public comment tonight. No one has asked to speak at tonight's meeting, so we'll go right on to the omnibus agenda. Items that are considered routine and will be taken with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And I would like to be excused on voting on any bills I may have incurred my duties as mayor. Mr. Fritzen?
Move approval.
Second. Items to be considered on the omnibus agenda are approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of August 7th, 2017, and approval of minutes of the special meeting of August 11th, 2017. Approval of the Town of Normal expenditures for payment as of August 16th, 2017. A motion to initiate a zoning text amendment to include churches and other places of public worship within the listed permitted uses in an M1 restricted manufacturing zone district. A resolution waiving the formal bid process and accepting a quote from Seneca Companies for the installation of an electronic leak detection equipment at the Town of Normal fuel dispensing pumps, and that's at a total cost of $24,738.71. A resolution authorizing the execution of a contract with McLean County Asphalt Company in the amount of $225,007.50 for the Ironwood Golf Course Path reconstruction project, including an authorization to undertake additional golf cart improvements up to a total project maximum of $300,000. A resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a service agreement with the lowest responsible bidder for the supply of electricity for residential and small commercial retail customers under the Town of Normal Municipal Aggregation Program. A resolution to accept bids and award a contract to Stark Excavating Incorporated in the amount of $146,320 for the improvement of the Orlando Avenue from Northbrook Drive to approximately 450 feet east of Northbrook Drive. A resolution approving a salary schedule adjustment for classified employees to reflect a cost of living adjustment. A resolution approving waivers for the Uptown Design Review Code, Chapter 15, Division 17 for 200 Broadway, having to do with the new Starbucks going in there. An ordinance prohibiting parking on the 500 block of Dale Street. An ordinance vacating the Maple Hill Road rail crossing of the North Fork Southern Railroad contingent on Illinois Commerce Commission approval of a rail crossing closure incentive payment. An ordinance amending section 15.6-20C of the zoning code concerning permitted uses in an M2 general manufacturing district having to do with kennels with or without dwelling units for a superintendent. Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The omnibus agenda is approved. We have two items of general orders tonight. The first is a resolution conditionally and partially approving an amended final development plan for the Constitution Trail Center planned unit development having to do with an OSF medical office building.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Item 8, it concerns the same property, a resolution conditionally and partially approving the final plat for the 6th addition to the Constitution Trail Center subdivision, again, an OSF medical office building.
Move approval.
Thank you. Discussion on this item. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
That concludes our general orders. We have two items of new business. The first is a presentation by members of the Vision 2040 subgroup on race and law enforcement, and I think they're out there somewhere. Drum roll.
I don't think they thought you were going to be this
Oh, we're always speeding.
expeditious on the consent agenda.
Caught you off guard.
They were in anticipation of this report.
Couldn't wait to get to it.
We're just missing an additional member.
Christine. He's coming.
Christine is coming.
This was the.
Christina, Dante, as co-chairs, it's all yours.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are pleased to be here. We want to thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Manager, Mr. Peterson, as well as the esteemed council members. We, again, appreciate you all giving us an opportunity to talk about something that's extremely important to this group, as well as the town of Normal. So, this group, the Race and Law Enforcement Subgroup, is a spinoff of the 2040 group, and I think most know where we came last year and gave a presentation. But we knew that there needed to be much more work done in this area. And we thought that this was a really good platform. We didn't want to run the risk of glossing over something that is very real and sincere, and we know from recent events around the nation, particularly in Charlottesville. And one thing I want to be very clear about when we talk about this is there will be people, because we are daring to have this conversation, who will dismiss this as race baiting and anti-police talk, but it's not, because the reality is something will happen. The question is, what are we going to do about it? We can either ignore it and act as if we don't have a problem, or we can try to get ahead of this thing and be prepared if and when it does take place. So that is a way to sort of level set so people understand where we're coming from. We do come here today as a united group, and we've had some very difficult and tough conversations, as they need to be, because the problems don't go away if you don't deal with them. And with that being said, I just want to really express my appreciation, and I know it's on behalf of all my colleagues here, for what we call the leadership courage of this administration here. And it was very evident from the beginning with the mayor and the city manager. And I also have to give a shout out to Chief Bleichner, who I know that some of the conversations probably were a little uncomfortable at times. But he hung in there, and he wanted to listen. And instead of being defensive about it, he really opened up and listened, and he's been a thought partner at the table. And I'm not sure that the chief has missed a meeting. And so I think that's something that the town should really be proud about, because he's not a chief that we have to run down. He's right here. He wants to be a part of the process. So that was very evident from the very beginning. And before I turn it over to Christina, I also want to be clear about the importance of working with ISU, in particularly, Dr. Frank Beck at the Stevenson Center and his report, because prior to that, there were several anecdotal conversations and things that have taken place that, unless you are a part of that particular community, you just don't know about it. And having his data and the students who worked on it really helped to validate some of the things that people have been feeling. So this is a starting point for us.
So I want to talk to you a little bit more about the process we used and sort of describe what you're looking at. We are a subgroup of the 2040 Vision team, as Dante mentioned. We knew at the time of creating our vision statement, which you might remember, our tag started with, "We have a place for you."
Christina,
Yeah.
could you kind of turn the microphone in? Thank you.
Is this better? So you might remember that our actual vision was, "We have a place for you in our vibrant, prosperous, and connected community." Social equity was one of the core values that came out of the 2040 vision, as you will remember from our last visit here. And as we started to do that work through 2016, we were very aware of things happening all around the country. And we knew when we handed off the original report to you in a section called Gaps to Close, that we just didn't go far enough in some of the issues around social equity, around racism, discrimination, injustice. And so, as Dante mentioned, some of the leadership courage within Town of Normal, we were allowed to come back with whoever from our original team wanted to and dig further into the issues that we really felt like were urgent. You know, it's important, and as Dante indicated, we have all the strengths at our disposal for making it a very proactive and responsive conversation and not a reactive one. So we were able to meet monthly for about the past 7 months and just keep kind of going at it. And by at it, we have for you a number of pieces, a few pieces that we think would dovetail nicely into the big 2040 vision, and also some recommendations for continuing the community conversation and the work to be done around race and law enforcement. Around the social equity core value on the report, or in the report on page 4, just as an FYI, we have a few vision statements that we think would fit nicely in addition to the document we've already handed off to you. And I think if we just read through those real briefly, you get a feel for the very big picture, systemic kind of arms we're trying to put around this issue. One is to connect to pride in place. We continue to feel very proud of that, and as Dante mentioned, some of the particular stakeholder groups that we have available reinforce that. To consider and reflect upon our own racism every day. So it's real. Recognize that imbalances of power work against our ability to discuss and disagree as equals. Expect continued change in the role of policing away from reactively addressing crime toward proactively addressing factors that lead to crime. Acknowledge the positives that are part of this process, as well as those that will result from this process, while acknowledging they are not necessarily easy to achieve. Right, so there is no silver bullet in this report, no magic or quick fix, and no one fix. We, as a group, participated, as I mentioned, over a series of meetings. Our strategy was to dive deeply into this complex topic. We spent time with compelling information that was a combination of personal stories, data collected locally and nationally, benchmarked practices from other communities across the country. And that's something that we would recommend as our community continues to engage in this issue. If you look at any one of these things by itself, just stories, just national data, just benchmark practices, you'll be missing something. The power really comes from looking at those things together around a table with other people. Our subgroup was pretty diverse, although we know we're not finished because we didn't have enough of the community participating. So we know there's more work to be done there. But our subgroup participants from the original 2040 Vision team who showed interest in furthering the discussion represent private business, human services, Town of Normal, educators, both from ISU, Illinois Central College. We've got folks who are critically engaged, Unit 5 Board of Education members, parents, community members at large. So we were very fortunate also to have Chief Fleischner as part of the law enforcement group as well. So that's kind of a story of where we came from and how we proceeded to work together. In this, the time that we have remaining, we're going to talk a little bit more about our experiences and the recommendations that we've got. But we wanted to pause for any initial reaction or any initial questions.
Questions or reactions?
We got you spellbound, right? So, alrighty. So I don't know if, Mike, you would like to go next?
You'd like to
Talk
go
a little bit
next?
about your thoughts.
Yeah. Just some of the thoughts, just kind of talking about why I even got involved. I got involved in the 2040 Vision Committee last year. Wanted to be part of the community, wanted to be how can I get involved in the community and how can I help with the future vision of the Town of Normal. Through that, this other group was through our vision portion of it. This came about and I was like, this is something I want to be involved in. The reason being is because I hear all these news reports, these statistics, the stories, the different things that we kind of collected over time, but it was always at a national level, always at a different level. So I wanted to say, well, how can I do something different instead of sitting on the sidelines? So this is something that I felt, this is something I could do. I could get involved. I could get involved in the community and, you know, get off the sidelines and be a participant and hear these stories, which was hard stories to hear. We had a couple of people came in there and shared how it has affected their families, how it's affected their, just individually, and it's just heartbreaking. It's just like, wow, this is something I have not experienced myself. So this was something that was very good for me to hear. On top of that, with the statistics that we were using from the Stevenson Center, that was very helpful to understand, because numbers, as you know, can be very complicated. It can be skewed one way or another. So this was very practical to say, okay, looking at our population and looking at the minority groups and understanding what does that play, how does this, what's going on in this community, and trying to understand what can we do to improve. And it was, again, like Dante said, and everyone has said before, is we're not trying to say the police are doing a bad job. We're saying how can we improve as a community. We all have ability to improve. That's the key. Is I have to improve and somebody else does too. But I can't do that if I stay home and never come out. So this is a way I could respond and be involved with this and continue to be involved, because this is something I want to continue to see how I can be a help or just be an ear or something.
My name is Marcos Mendez, and the reason that I decided I wanted to be involved in this subgroup and the 2040 Vision Committee was because first I was past chair of an organization, civic organization, Conexiones Latinas de McLean County, and when I was there, I was able to have some conversations with community members, not only Latino community members, but also all people of color here within this community. And some of the things that I was hearing were disturbing to me. People were saying, well, when I moved here to Normal, they said, why would you move to Normal? I don't even drive in Normal. Why don't you drive in Normal? I was asking myself. I didn't know why. I was coming from a place that I didn't understand that. But after working with some of these organizations and seeing why they felt this way, I felt that the work here was going to be fantastic and something that we needed to definitely engage in and move forward. So I only wanted to say one thing. There was a speaker. One last thing. There was a speaker at the Women of Distinction 2017. One of her quotes really hit home for me, especially being part of this organization or this subgroup. She said, "If we continue to fight the same battles, we can never forge new frontiers." And I think that this group is starting to forge new frontiers and starting to leave those battles and getting to a place where we can now all come together and work together as an entire community.
We wanted to dig in a little bit with the recommendations that we have. We don't, as you can tell, we're already jumping around in our report, so you are not gonna get a page by page, and we were not planning on reading to you, so there's that. We just wanted to mention one more time that when we talk about social equity, when we talk about addressing race in law enforcement, we are talking about a systemic issue, a systems issue. And so you would expect then for us to have needed every bit of the past few months that we spent digging into this and feel like there's a lot more to be done, and that's where we are now handing off to ask you for help us do more. And also, we want there to be, again, more folks involved. To Mike and Marcos's point, there's so many more people who are feeling like they want to have their stories be shared and to have the data in front of them. And so we have some recommendations on how we might go about doing that. So we're not leaving you completely at the starting point, hopefully. So we've got about 5 broad categories of recommendations in the report. They start on page 5. We'll talk a little bit about these. Again, we don't plan to go into every detail, but of course we'll open back up to questions, and you're free to flag us if you want to stop us mid-sentence. We know, for example, there are about 5 categories. So I'll just mention the 5 and then we'll talk you through a few of those things. Again, we mentioned the public process. We would like there to be an actual invitation to the public to get more community dialogue and community education underway. Getting data about how police and community interact is a second area. Community culture change regarding police and law enforcement. Normal Police Department continuous improvement in policy level work. And then we've got a couple of things to share with you that we would like for further study, potential types of boards that might be useful, either a traditional community review board or something that we have as an original idea called the Community Policing Culture Board. We'll talk to you a little bit more about what that is in a little bit. All right, Marcus.
So the first recommendation of the public process is we recommend planning, implementing, and learning from a public process that is characterized by diverse stakeholder engagement, dialogue, trust building, and action planning. So know that this is, like one of our subgroup members mentioned, this is the starting point. This is not the finish line. This is where we're starting the conversations, the hard conversations that need to be had. We're gonna have roundtable discussions, or we're recommending roundtable discussions. Community members, what this turned out to be, as we saw, was a pilot program for what this can be in the future. We see community members coming together, Normal Police Department representation, town normal management, town council representation. That's key to moving forward with integrity and with sensitivity. We have a list of stakeholders on page 3 as well. We'll also have our listening sessions where we'll brainstorm strategies, mitigate bias, acknowledge bias, and even implicit bias. There may be some education that needs to happen around those types of things, those types of topics as well. So that's understood by this subgroup. We want to make sure that we address those. Community education. That's community education of the Normal Police Department and their processes. There are community members that may not understand the process and how the police department works. We want to be that group that educates them on that. We want to build awareness of diversity, racial bias again, the mission and services within the community with emphasis on minority and underserved communities. Through these kinds of learning events, community members may better understand when they should call police for assistance. So better understanding that. And finally, in this group is social gatherings, use of public meeting spaces such as Uptown Circle. I think that everyone here understands the importance and the importance of the Uptown Circle and how it's important to building community and understanding community, reinforce the connectedness and even some of the fun of gathering together in Uptown, shared use of this public space. We talked at the beginning, bringing it back to the 2040 vision of pride of place. This is where we should all want to be. We should all want to be here hanging out together. We live together. We have common values and beliefs. Public venues could include police neighborhood meetings, standing communication loops and networks among town and normal police department stakeholders, and also community influencers and leaders, which is very important. We want to make sure that they're also engaged.
And just for the sake of time, I'm just gonna hit on well, I'll try to summarize this, so. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. He was about to cut in on Mike,
Sorry.
but
Oh,
wait.
that's okay. That's okay.
Slow down.
My part is the data, how police and community interact. Basically, what we're trying to do here is look at the data, as I expressed earlier, my first comments was about understanding the data, how that is reflected, how do we understand it, and how do we digest it. By doing this, we want to share the data that is being tracked by the Normal Police Department. And we want to be able to do it in a friendly way, a reader-friendly way, because we can all look at a spreadsheet or some type of data and it's like it looks confusing and we don't know what we're looking at. And then we draw our own conclusions and just assume something that possibly is not there. But some of the basics that we're trying to look at is looking at, some of the data we're trying to look at will be, time of day, when the police have interaction with the residents, pedestrian data, demographics of the pedestrian stops, a little bit more detailed, traffic stops data by race, which a lot of this is already happening. And then we just want to be able to have more targeted data. We want to show we want to find out what is missing, what is something that's important and is worthwhile, because we can collect data to collect data and it means nothing. So let's find out, let's really look at the data, see what's important and how do we address it and what we're going to do about it, than just saying, okay, we'll just put this on the shelf and ignore what it's telling us. So beyond that, we want to, the other thing too is beyond the conventional data collection, we want to just have this interaction between, again, the community and the police department. How do we, quantify that, qualify that as where is that going to be? We want to know there's a purpose to what we're doing, and the community knows there's a purpose. So when they look at this data, they look at the things that's going on, that we have a purpose. There is an actionable items. There's things that we can do with this and move forward.
You may speak.
My turn. I jumped the gun. Right? So we have, under Chief Bleichner's leadership, we have a police department that's CALEA certified 8 times running. And that is something that we should all be proud of. However, we are of the opinion that when you talk about community policing, that it's not the police's role to solely define what community policing looks like. We affirm and we truly believe that it is the people who go through it day in and day out. Those are the ones who are best positioned to be at the table and talk about what the needs are. So because they are an 8-time CALEA accredited police department, and we have a very open, or chief that's very open to working with us, this to me seems to fit right into the culture of continuous improvement. So some might ask, why are we doing this if our police department has these accolades? And I think the answer is, again, it fits into the culture of continuous improvement, because it's not good enough if certain groups or only certain individuals who feel safe and they feel confident about the police. We want that to be the mindset of every person in the town of Normal. And the way that that happens is that we all have a role. And I'll just say, just as a brief example, we say within every organization, and I know we do at ours at the YWCA, that safety is everyone's responsibility. But don't expect for the YWCA to come up with a surefire safety plan, because that's not what we do. We are best positioned to do community work. And when it comes to safety, the officers know what they're doing, but we're talking about community. So this is an opportunity. It's not about dividing. This is about an opportunity for us to come together and work together in unison to bring about some very positive results.
We have a couple of things, like we mentioned, that we would say we are ready to share with you as for further study. We know, thank you so much. We know that other communities are looking at something called a Community Relations Board, and we would say, after having learned a little bit about it as a subgroup, that it's worthy of further consideration. And there are clear steps about how you would go about adopting such a tool, if that would be deemed beneficial, through what Marcos was describing, community process of education and dialogue, and as Dante's referencing, interaction between community members and law enforcement. We, having already done some work on the vision plan previously, have a more original idea that we'd like to propose, and so we devote a good portion of the latter pages of our report setting that out for you. And again, I won't read it to you or spoon feed it to you, but I would just like to draw your attention to the potential benefits of doing something other communities aren't doing, because maybe they didn't think of it, or they didn't realize in your own community you can write your own path. And we know we can, because we have a lot of models about that already. So here's our original idea, is something called the Community Policing Culture Board. We want something like that because we're not sure the language of Community Relations Board goes far enough in showing a more holistic approach to how community policing can be realized. We want there to be a way to formalize that community policing is the approach of choice. And so the best thing for us, that kind of gave us the most reassurance that there would be life of this issue even beyond a little subgroups meeting, is an interdisciplinary and interrelated kind of board. And so we see that there are tracks that should be moving in parallel simultaneously. It's not linear. It should happen cumulatively, right? So we've got this idea that at the same time that we're working on relationship building within our communities, it doesn't matter if it's just about law enforcement and the communities they serve, just the community, as Marcos was mentioning before, we need to do a good job of building relationships with one another. There's work around communication and engagement, getting the word out, educating folks, recognition and complaint. Sure, we want to make sure that people are recognized for being in front of certain competencies and abilities, and also a place for us to redirect and address issues. Training and policy have a place as well. And there could be more. Like, we don't even know that we're done building out this little circle. But these were the things we could come up with. And we know that together, these multiple areas of focus create one sense of community policing, one sense of a community response to social equity. So that's something that we'd just like to put into your laps now, and then help build community conversation about that. Again, we don't think for sure this would be what would be adopted, or that it would look like this. You know, everybody else can have some fingerprints on it as well. We would just be very interested in seeing original thinking, an original plan, and something that shows it as a systems issue. Social equity needs multiple types of attention. It needs multiple touches. It needs multiple stakeholders like what we represented. We respect, again, as we've mentioned, the hard and strong work of Normal Police Department, and we don't want them going it alone or on our behalf. We want it to be shared work. So, if helpful, there's appendix material, suggested data. We mentioned the Stevenson report previously, and then a really healthy recommended resources section. We know that as you think about the public process, engaging other stakeholders, you'd be as curious as we were about where would you even start to pull information together. And as Marcos said, we really feel like we piloted something amazing, and we want other people to have that experience. And so we put whatever we could to make it possible to replicate on a larger scale in your hands tonight. So I'll just kick it over to any final thoughts, Chief. I know we've, again, benefited from you being at the table. Not just tonight, but literally like all the months.
Well, that's one of the benefits of going near the end, right? Everybody has all the good material, and it leaves me with just a couple of comments, so I'll try and be very brief. But, the one thing that comes across to me, and over the last week or week and a half, we've really shared this with my staff, and some are encouraged, anxious, some are, wait and see. But I think there's an overall buzz within the police department, because a lot of this community engagement it's in our wheelhouse. I mean, that's what we do, that's what we continue to do. We look at this as a way to enhance our community policing model, or our philosophy, if you will, and going in hand with what Dante had said. I mean, we've been CALEA accredited since 1994, and we work hard because that's a system of best practices. But you can't ignore in the best practices the human element. And so looking at the systems, we have to be able to sit down and come together and look at that. And we're not shy to have those conversations. One of the things that this process, although is different, one of the common similarities that I see in a lot of other processes is over the 7 or 8 months that we've met, we probably were on, we had some varying opinions, but after we shared information, we came a little bit closer together on those things. And I think that's what's going to happen as we hopefully move forward and have these additional discussions and bring people to the table, because we want to understand the issues that are out there in the community. And we tend to have we think we do a very good job of sharing information about our programs and our services and all that, but some of it is some of the same that we've been doing, and some of the feedback we get the same individuals at the same programs. And so I think this process will be helpful in bringing other stakeholders to the table that have some additional legitimacy that can share that information and say, hey, the Normal Police Department's having this event, they're doing this program, they're doing this. It's a force multiplier for us because it then, if we get them on board, they can then share that within their groups, their organizations, and we get better feedback, and that's what it's all about at the end. And the other nice thing I think about it is we're, thankfully, knock on wood, we're not in a reactionary mode right now. You know, we've had time over the last 7 or 8 months, but we're not reacting to a specific problem that occurred in our community, and we're trying to reel from that and make decisions, and on top of it, affect change. We're doing so, and this group is very conscious of doing that in a very thoughtful way. And the big takeaway for me and what I've shared with my staff is not only is that in our wheelhouse and that is an extension of what we do through ACLEA and through our community policing model, but it's also, at the end of the day, it's what's best for the community. You know, we want our officers to go home at the end of the day. We want the community to be a safe place. We don't want to have situations that occur where there are situations that come up or critical incidents that then have things blow up in your community and then thrust you on the national media, because it doesn't benefit anybody. So we're hopeful that we come together, we can get ahead of this and have some discussions ahead of time. And we want to avoid those because it's safer for the community and it's safer for our officers at the end of the day. Everybody wants to go home. I mean, policing is a difficult job, but also, and you know, I believe that our officers and our staff do an outstanding job, but I also understand, and we understand, that there are individuals that have a different opinion based on their experiences, and we need to be open to hearing those. And so, again, I've been fascinated with the process. I've appreciated those relationships we built and the information that we shared over that time. And so I'm excited about the steps moving forward.
Mayor, I'd like to make a few comments. I've also had the opportunity to participate in these meetings, and I've got to tell you, despite some difficult conversations, it's been an exhilarating process for me, because I've just learned so much, and working with the 4 people here. And I want to also point out the other people in the subgroup that are here. Kevin McCarthy was on that subgroup. Kathy Stedman is out there. Karen Stipp is out there, and Jen Carrillo is wheeled herself into the room. And I want to particularly point out Jennifer. She did a lot of work, and I don't know why she's in a wheelchair. I'll find that out later. But she did a lot of work and has really been a driving force behind this. So a real quality group of people, and it's really been the conversations were, like I said, exhilarating. There are other people here in the 2040. If you're on the 2040 committee, you raise your hand, because I know I see Dave out there, and maybe there's Kathy. And so we appreciate what you all have done. And I do have just a few semi-prepared comments to make. I want to say that during my 3 decades here, nearly 3 decades, I've had the good fortune to witness many successes of the town of Normal. But frankly, I think I would be hard-pressed to recall a prouder moment than I'm experiencing tonight with this presentation and this initiative. Consistent with the town of Normal's reputation, this organization is willing and even eager to confront head-on one of the most difficult and contentious issues in our society today. I want to thank the presenters specifically this evening, along with the others that have been involved in this, what I'll call a conversation over the past several months. This is clearly a community issue. It's universal. It affects and applies to everyone, every one of us. However, when it comes to eradicating racial bias in our community, you must start somewhere, and there's no better place to start within the local police department. Sadly, racism is alive and well in this country, and it's right here in Normal, Illinois. It exists in our businesses, in our civic organizations, our neighborhoods, even in our churches. And we also must accept the natural conclusion that racial bias also exists within our own police department. These men and women who comprise our excellent local law enforcement organization are fundamentally no different than the rest of us. They are molded, or they were molded and shaped by their own upbringing. They are products of their environments, an environment where racial bias was a reality and still is such. Now, let me clarify, even though I do believe that racial bias exists among our law enforcement professionals, I also believe that for the most part, it exists on a subconscious level. I see no evidence of conscious racism in the Normal Police Department. However, I'm also not so naive to state emphatically that conscious racism absolutely does not exist. I want everyone to understand, and particularly the chief who has been part of this process in our police department, that I am extremely proud of the Normal Police Department. I firmly believe that our department is among the most professional, productive, ethical, and compassionate law enforcement agencies in the country. As Dante pointed out, an 8-time recipient of the coveted CALIA certification and a recipient with distinction, I might add, the Normal Police Department is clearly among an elite group of law enforcement agencies in this country. A lot of credit for this accomplishment must go to the outstanding leadership within the department, including, of course, headed by Chief Bleichner and others that came before him. However, I think most of the credit goes to the men and women in uniform who are out in our streets every day trying to help people and trying their absolute best to keep us all safe. But racism in any form is absolutely unacceptable within our law enforcement organization. The people in law enforcement have the statutory authority to take away the liberty of ordinary citizens. It is an extraordinary level of authority and power. In my opinion, that authority is carefully and appropriately exercised by our police department in most cases. However, with the exception of the fact that racial bias exists in our department, as it does in virtually every American institution, we must strive to address it here and now, and we intend to make the Normal Police Department ground zero in our community's efforts to eradicate racism, and we don't plan to stop there. We want to eradicate it, and not just in the police department, but in all town departments and throughout the community. I also want to acknowledge that police officers in our community and in all other communities across the country face extraordinary challenges today. The jobs are extremely dangerous. As an example, how many of us wear Kevlar body armor to work every day? And those vests are not a fashion statement. And when the temperature is 95 degrees, they are, I'm sure, very, very uncomfortable. But nevertheless, they wear them every day because they understand the potential consequences if they don't. The entire community, including those groups that feel disenfranchised from law enforcement, need to better understand what police officers deal with every day. We need to better understand the rules and the legal mandates with which they must comply, and we must understand the truly dangerous environment that these dedicated men and women step into every single day when they put on their uniforms. So it's a big issue. It's a complicated issue, and we have to start with conversation. And I think that's what you heard today. And that's what we've been engaged in for the past 7 months or so. As each of these presenters eloquently emphasized, open, honest, and respectable dialogue will foster enhanced mutual understanding. We then layer upon that appropriate education, training, we establish progressive policies, and we evaluate performance and behavioral changes over time. And we continue to talk to one another. There is no such thing as too much communication. The words of Dr. Martin Luther King could not be more relevant today than they were when he spoke them some 50 years ago, and I quote, "People fail to get along because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other, and they don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other." So the time for our community to act is now, and we should, I think, celebrate the fact that we're choosing to act together, to move forward together with no finger pointing and no blaming, but we recognize that we're all part of the problem. We all need to be part of the solution, every single one of us. So, Mayor and Council, with that, I'm anxious to turn this discussion over to you. I'm sure the presenters will be happy to respond to questions, as will Chief Bleichner, and I will as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. I just want to make a few comments, and I'll probably make more later, but When the 2040 committee was assembled, it was done so with a very keen eye to changing it up a little bit. And the idea was to get a broader representation of our community, be it socioeconomic, be it ethnic, be it age. So, and I think we accomplished that, and the group was amazing to watch. And the meetings that I attended, I will say, they worked very hard, and they faced some very tough questions. And it took them a while to get common ground on that, but they did get common ground on that. And it's important to recognize that going forward with this new initiative was their idea, not our idea. They're the ones that said this needs to happen in our community, and they were willing to tackle it. And so the meeting I sat in on this subgroup was a tough meeting, but you could tell that people were working very hard to find some common ground or common solution going forward. And what you've given us tonight is a lot to digest, and we're most eagerly going to do that because I think it is spot on in terms of the direction we go. You know, the mechanics and the specifics of it as we come together on this, those will get put together as they will. But the reason for it so well presented tonight and some quick starts are very well presented, and thank you for that. So, Council?
I do want to just add to people in the audience that we have copies of the report that will be handed out to everybody, and it will be on the website tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Mr. Fritzen?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I do appreciate it. And I appreciate Dante's, some of your introductory remarks about how some people can just be dismissive of something like this. And after hearing the presentation, hearing your thinking, that would be so wrong if people were to do that. I work in a local print shop, and today we're doing a booklet for the admissions department at Illinois State University. And for those of you who don't understand how printed things go together, you print some of the pages in the front of the book and some of the pages in the back of the book, and then you kind of put them all together, and then you turn the pages and it all flows, right? I noticed a page, this is just, you know, too much to be just a coincidence, but I noticed a page in a folded thing, and it had a picture of the Uptown, the circle, and the headline on the page said, "Normal is amazing." And I thought, I wonder what the other page is that's going to face that to tell us why normal is amazing. But I'm sure there are a lot of things as far as, you know, what goes on in the community and different resources and whatever. But I think the point of pride for me, as I think of that, seeing that page today, is the people that we have in Normal. The rest of it is just the natural result of having good people. I really like the kind of redefinition of community policing. I'm not an expert in any of this, and there's plenty of resources, you know, more than just that page, just on community policing, I'm sure, to read, but kind of coming up with your own definition. A lot of original thinking here, and I like that. But making it a two-way thing. It's not just a way of policing, it's a way of doing community together, and so I like that. I like the idea of educating and building up those in the community and those in positions of authority, because we all need to be educated and built up in our understanding of these things. Over the years, as you know, we've had school resource officers out there and other programs where we actively are there or available anyway to intervene with individuals, particularly younger people. That intervention equals prevention has always been kind of a guiding thought, you know, that the police, we have, instead of just reacting, but if we intervene, perhaps we can prevent. And I think, you know, that's an important aspect of this, but also it sounds to me like intervention equals understanding, and that's the key to a lot of it, as Mr. Peterson kind of mentioned. I really like the idea of an original idea. You know, I think that's a great twist on it, and I think from what I've just heard about the way your meetings have gone and the like, you know, why should we be surprised that an original idea came out of that? And it seems so normal for that to happen. And I appreciate your work and look forward to, where we go with this. But that original idea is I think a great way to take that first step forward. It works for me. Thanks.
Ms. Lorenz?
Thank you so much for your summary, and I'm very intrigued by this whole process. So I appreciate the summary and then also the detail that you provided us. So with that said, on the detail level, looking at the recommended resources, and this may be a tough question, but would you recommend one or two or three of the items that are just kind of the must-reads that might really help to
Can I start off?
distill for me, at least, and maybe my colleagues here, what maybe you really talked about and some of those tough issues and discussions that you had. I find myself sitting here tonight wishing I'd been a fly on the wall, So maybe if you could point out one or two or top
Sure.
five to that end.
I'll mention one that I know was very compelling to our group as we were talking, and it has to do with NPR's Radio Lab, the Shots Fired episode.
Okay.
It's an easy listen. It's a podcast. You can, if you want to wash dishes or walk your dog or do something else, bring a hanky. I mean, it's tough, So I would just say for me, that really can bring some vantage points that your own personal life experience may not have created for you yet. And something that Mike said was the flies on the wall would have really enjoyed having an opportunity to just see so many different lenses in one room. We were more than the sum of our parts. And so I think Radio Lab would do a good job of kind of giving you into a position of learning and thinking.
Okay.
Marcos, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. The funny thing is that you said you wanted to be a fly on the wall, and what we've done with this organization or this group is, like we mentioned before, it's almost like a pilot program. So you too can be a fly on the wall if we can get another group like this together to now continue these conversations. And like I had mentioned before, from the quote from Lori Birch, forging those new frontiers. So this is replicable. We can do this again, and I think that we should. That would be part of the recommendation, is to do this again, to have even more voices. And then a recommendation here, James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time. That's a great one. And even the town the Normal Theater, they had a film that was about James Baldwin, and it was called I Am Not Your Negro. And that's another film. It's not on this list, but because of that book there, I also remember, and it's something that has a connection to Normal. They screened it there at the Normal Theater. So another reason why we want Normal to be a shining example in this type of programming.
I would just, if you notice, we have our very own Judy Valente on the list, so we'll give her a plug. I don't think you can go wrong, but a video or documentary that really touched me is the 13th, as in 13th Amendment. Last I checked, it's still on Netflix, and there's some type of rotation cycle, so you might want to check it out before it goes away. But it really focuses on our system of mass incarceration and how that works out and how it's profitable to really incarcerate people of color. And so it is something that we, in order to improve upon, we've got to grapple with it and have some honest conversation. But it's a really great video. It's not about left. It's not about right. It's just about the reality that many people are facing today.
Mr. McBride?
As Mayor Coos said, there is a lot to digest here, and I plan to spend some time doing just that. But so I don't know that I have a lot of questions at this point, but what I do feel compelled to do is to thank you for all of your efforts to this point. I'm sure more will be asked of you moving forward. The discussions, I'm sure, were emotionally draining and mentally draining, but it seems like they were productive in the end. So, again, thank you for your for not being defensive, not getting defensive, for admitting that no one has an easy answer. Thank you for your courage in not being concerned about those who would be dismissive of this process. I know that is not easy. I like radically normal, by the way. I like that a lot. So I guess it's now incumbent upon us, and I mean us, all of us, because we are all in it together. That's the definition of community. But also for my colleagues and I here at the table to figure out what we do next and how we make sure that this process keeps going. So let's get to work, and thank you.
Mr. McCarthy?
Start off saying thank you. I was fortunate enough you allowed me to participate in this process, and I do mean thank you in a lot of ways. I got to be honest with everybody in the audience. When this started coming up in 2040 vision, that we had some issues in the town, I was both nervous and concerned. Nervous because I'm a middle-aged white guy, if you haven't figured that out, and what do I have to add to this conversation? And concerned that if we weren't proactive, that we would lose the momentum from those conversations in the room. And I'm here to say that I'm relieved because of all of our hard work in the rooms and to keep the conversation alive. And you were gentle with me in the rooms. You weren't harsh with me in the rooms. And I've learned so much from each and every one of you going through this process. I do want to echo something my counterpart said is thank you for your courage. You talked about leadership courage. These were difficult conversations. Our two leaders, Dante and Christina, never shying away from the conversation when it got hard, but tried to do a great job helping us frame up of how do we take that conversation and move it forward and do something positive out of it. I'm still amazed out of a room full of people and some conversations all over the place that we came up with succinct things. And by we, I mean you guys. Put this into some really succinct, great next stuff. So some of the things, Mr. Peterson put it very well. It's a very proud moment, I think. One of my proudest as councilman over the last 5 years to be a part of this particular group. I think what this does is a couple of things. It acknowledges that we're not immune to racism and bias in our community, but also that we're resolved to do something about it proactively, as Chief said before, a crisis of national proportions happens in our community. Also, I think it goes beyond addressing crime and punishment as the perspective. It goes much farther to really to help us begin to figure out how to address us as a community and how we engage with our police department to define what service and safety really mean for us as an engaged community and to the future. And it really focuses on engagement from all members of our community, because after all, our police are part of our community. They're part of us, and so we should be able to engage on that level. A couple more thank yous. Thank you, Chief. Really appreciated your willingness to be in the room and talk about this, and no surprise coming from you and who you are as an individual and as a leader. And then thanks the mayor for supporting these types of things, because I think it's part of what makes us radically normal. And then finally, I've got to share with my counterparts and the people in the room here. I think all of us were taken aback at a particular moment, and it's thanking Mr. Peterson, who came into the meeting and supported this when he saw how important this was, and just put his hands on his table and openly said, racism exists here in our town, racism exists in our police force. And it was an extremely powerful moment for all of us, and just say what a fantastic opportunity he stepped into to really own it, so we could get to the conversation of what do we do about it, rather than haggling about does it or doesn't it exist. So thank you to Mr. Peterson as well.
Mr. Preston?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all of you who presented. About 4 weeks ago, I spent 2 or 3 days in Atlanta, Georgia, and one of the days I was down there, some of the work that I was doing had wrapped up probably about 3 o'clock or so, and had a little extra time that I didn't anticipate in the afternoon and into the evening. During that time, I chose just by myself to go to the Center for Civil Rights, that is right by Centennial Olympic Park in downtown Atlanta. And something that I just, and still now am taken back to, that I was not able to shake was there is a part in that space and in that operation where they have a countertop, much like a diner from 50 years ago or so, and they kind of ask 3 or 4 individuals to go up at a time. You have headphones, and certainly are encouraged to experience with your eyes closed a recording of what it was like to be part of a sit-in back during the civil rights movement in the 60s. And I will tell you that it was hard for me to do that even for the 6 or 7 minutes with my eyes closed, fully engulfed in it. And just being in a situation that may have been something I've never experienced before and may have been outside of my comfort zone even for that short amount of time it was difficult. And I say that in the context of only further emphasizing how important, how valuable, how needed I think the work that you all have committed yourselves to in this process the last 7 months is. Boy, what a country and what a world I think we would live in if every community took the approach of starting the conversation proactively, bringing all sides together in a way that is based on a willingness and hopefully an eagerness to get to know and understand another side. Doing so in a way that is productive and built on respect and honest is what a country we would live in if everybody approached this proactively like you all have. Thank you very much for the presentation. I truly appreciate it. I truly appreciate the work that you committed yourselves to, and certainly, am eager to be part of this process moving forward, however I can from here. Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if you really want me to go last, but I will. First of all, just thank you for your time this evening and being here and presenting. For me, I have a totally different perspective and a different spin. I feel like this should be happening. It shouldn't be just a thank you because you did this work one time. We have to make sure that we are continuously being vigilant about what we say. And that one of my biggest mottos is that we cannot be a town of words, but a place of action. It's going to take all of us. It's not about the sympathy of what we see, of what's going on nationally. It's not to sympathize because you don't simply just understand, but willing to roll up your sleeves, put your thoughts, your perceptions, your biases aside, and do the work. We know there's work to be done on all levels in our community to maintain the community we want to see and want to be. And that is my hope. Not only just look at it from a perspective of police, but what we can do to maintain a community where everyone comes and feels welcome. My husband and I often talk about the family portrait, and we want to make sure that everyone feels like they have a place in the portrait and no one should be left out. That we all feel safe, whether it's from our neighbor or from our police. And we have to all be willing to do the work. Not to just be the words, but be the workers behind the words. I encourage you to keep pushing forward. I encourage you to do more and find out more ways to even become better so that you can make this town the best it can be. Yet we are small, we want to be mighty. Yet we still want to be a destination place in the middle of Illinois. And in order to do that, it takes all of us, all races, ages, sizes, colors, nationalities, and religions to make that happen. Thank you for your time, and I encourage you to continue to do more.
Further on this?
Chris, a couple of closing comments. I just want to say, I think, I was going to say this earlier, so this is the easy part. I mean, as much work has gone in the last several months, this is the easy part. It's the first single step on a 1,000-mile journey. Maybe it's a 10,000-mile journey. So it is, as Kimber says, it is just words at this point. And now the work starts, and I think what is incumbent upon the town, the council, and the staff, working with all the people in this room, is okay, let's take it forward. This has been a very closed, private process. Nine or 10 people in the room. We all acknowledge that's not enough. This is a starting point. Now we open it up. Now this becomes a community-wide dialogue, and there's a list on page 3 of just a very limited list of some of the stakeholders. All of these need to be engaged, and then others, on a very robust level. There are a lot of moving parts to this and lots of moving pieces, but it's incumbent upon us now to let's take it forward and have a very public process and do all the hard work. RC said it, let's get to work, and it's going to be a lot of hard work. But I think it sounds like everybody's ready to go, and we're ready to commit the effort and do what needs to be done to take these words and actually make them reality and make something of them. So what I will, and I'm sure you're all sitting here as I have, well, what do we do next? Now, what do we do with all this? Well, I plan to put together some thoughts, and I'm certainly hope we can continue to engage these people who were involved, but again, expand it to others to begin to start implementing some of these recommendations, having some of these, very honest, open, respectful dialogues. We certainly want to bring law enforcement to the table, not just the chief, but officers to the table. So there's a lot of work to do, a lot of work, and I think we're up to it. But I'll put together some thoughts for council to consider on how to get started. Maybe this may be a work session topic here in the very near future, where you can kind of roll your sleeves up and dig into the detail as this group has done. And I appreciate people's willingness to allow us to have this very private, several-month conversation, because I think those of us felt we needed that. We needed some privacy but now it's time to open this up to the public. And I think all of us are kind of excited to do that and see what the public says and what they feel and what they think about some of these recommendations. So we'll get moving on that and try to get you some ideas on how you can move forward with this report.
Thank you, Mark. I would agree, without taking away from all the tough work you've done. That's been the easy piece so far. And I will say they have worked very hard on it, and they're still very impassioned on this issue, but they're going to need some help. They're going to need some people to step up and say, I want to be part of this process. We haven't heard it in a while, but the previous mayor before me, Kent Carricker, always had a saying that we plan our work and we work our plan, that we don't take these things lightly, that when we get programs like this, recommendations like this, we will do this. This is not something we're going to put on the shelf and say, hey, we did a great job identifying a problem, now let's move on to something else. We are going to work this issue. And we're going to need, as Mark just said, we're going to need community help to do that. And we're going to need a lot of voices to make this really work. This is going to take time. There's going to be stumbling blocks. There are going to be frustrations along the way. But, if everybody works incrementally and towards a common shared goal, I think we'll get it done. But it's going to take hard work and time, and it's going to take you. Any further for this panel? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is a presentation by Mark de Kiersgieter. Did I finally get that right, Mark?
You did?
Yeah. Executive Director of the Central Illinois Regional Broadband Network. He's got a brief update for us.
Tough act to follow.
Yeah. Retrospect, I was just thinking, we probably should have ended with them.
But been delayed 3 meetings, and so I felt an obligation.
Yeah, good point.
Tough act to follow, Mark.
Yeah, I was gonna say, nothing like going at the end here. So I'd like to thank the mayor and the council for having me out again. It's been a little over a year since the last time I was here, and we provide an update to each one of the member entities just to kind of keep you apprised of the status of Serban and what we're continuing to do in the community. So I have a brief presentation. I do have a new face or two on between the council and the staff, so start off with a brief history of Serban. There was originally grant funding available back in 2010, and a team of people working at ISU applied for some grant money and got in excess of $15 million to build out Serban, which is the Central Illinois Regional Broadband Network. It is a fiber optic network throughout Central Illinois, serving basically Bloomington Normal and a 45-minute radius of Bloomington Normal. So I have some pictures from the construction process. One item of note, when you think about what's changed just in the last few years, this is Veterans in College and the old Signature Inn in the background, which is now Chick-fil-A and a number of other restaurants in that area. So ISU, as the grant recipient, managed the funding and build-out of the entire network. And then once the grant funding ended at the end of 2013, the assets were all transferred to Serban LLC, and that was all part of the original grant application process. So when you think about the actual fiber network itself, it's all throughout Central Illinois, and I've got a map I'm going to show in a minute, but there were a few communities that the grant team wanted to hit as well, that the cost to get there by fiber was just too prohibitive. So there's a number of wireless links on our network, which are super high-speed wireless point-to-point links from the top of Waterston Towers out to rural communities, so we can service them as well. During the grant, there was a high emphasis put on anywhere that children go to learn, so we have all the K through 12 school districts within our area, all the private schools that serve K through 12 students, universities, museums, libraries, emergency responders, and municipalities. So there's the network as it was originally built out by the grant team, and the blue lines note are rings around Central Illinois, and the dark blue lines are the municipalities where we provide services and where our assets are. So Serban is a fiber optic network. We provide really fast internet. All of our standard deployments for all of our customers can do 1 gig, and we have many customers that have in excess of 1 gig. Our largest customer under contract is 17 gig. Our service is a symmetric service, so our upload speeds and our download speeds match. So if somebody's on a 50 meg connection, they'll get 50 meg up and 50 meg down. If they're on a gig, they'd get a gig up and a gig down. What's significant about that is that traditional broadband services usually have a quarter or a third of the speed as an upload speed. And as organizations rely more and more on the cloud, the upload speed becomes more and more important. We provide 2 basic services. We provide internet access and we provide intranet access. So intranet is a service we provide to the town, connecting all of the sites that the town has on Serban between them so they can all talk amongst themselves. So I mentioned that the assets were spun off of the ISU records to Serban LLC. We are a limited liability company registered in the state of Illinois, and we do have a 501c3 status that was granted to us in August of 2014. We are governed by a board of members from our managers. So the town itself is a member entity in Serban, along with the city of Bloomington, Heartland Community College, City of Pontiac, Illinois State University, and McLean County Unit 5. So each one of the member entities appoints one person from their organization to represent them on the Serban board. For the town, it's Mark Peterson, who also serves currently as our board chairman. We have monthly meetings, and then we also have an annual planning session to focus on strategy, long-term goals, things like that. Is there any questions thus far? Just checking. So a couple of updates recently. We completed our first 2 years of audits, an audit of our first 2 years of financials, and we received a clean opinion, so we're happy about that. We've done a couple of significant projects over the past year, one of which was for the town of Normal. It had been identified that there was a lack of broadband connectivity in northeast Normal, especially in the area that there was some growth and expansion with the Distill Brewery. And so the town did an expansion project out there, and we connected the Distill Brewery along with a number of other client sites out in that area that were underserved. We also had a project up in the city of Pontiac. A couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago, the city owns all the land out on Deerfield Road, which is the frontage road along Highway 55, and they were marketing that for development. And they expanded Serban down to the end of the road there so they could include access to fiber optic network in their marketing of that land. And since that time, there's been a new Hampton Inn that's been put in, and a business called H&H Installations relocated there from Forest and have gotten on to Serban. So since the grant ended, we have continued to organically grow our network throughout Central Illinois and connect additional organizations. These could be for-profit, they can be nonprofit, they can be a public library, they could be an additional school. We had an expansion north to Flanagan, and we added another school district up there, the Flanagan Cornell School District. That was of significance because it was the first school district outside of our original service map that we were able to bring into the Serban service. So since the grant has ended, this is the updated map. If you'll notice from before, the defining line on the north side was US 24 going across El Paso, Gridley, and Chenoa. We now expand north all the way up to Winona, and we also have Mahomet on the map as well. So when we talk about connecting communities and the ongoing maintenance that Serban performs, sometimes people don't realize how important and critical that is. We are a member of the Julie One Call system, so that if anyone is digging in their yard, they can call 811 and register themselves and where they're going to be digging. I have some just educational things there. For us, for Serban, we use orange flags, which is for communications. And there's just an example of how things can be marked and where people can dig when they call in. Trivia question, would anyone like to take a guess of how many locate tickets Serban's responded to last calendar year? Anyone? Anybody see something like this in the right-of-way as you're driving around Bloomington Normal? I'm sure Gene Brown loves pictures like this. We actually responded to over 9,000 tickets all across our service area throughout Central Illinois just in last calendar year. So when we talk about continuing our mission to provide state-of-the-art quality internet service and all the ongoing maintenance and support to make sure our network stays up all the time, this is just one component of the things we have to do to ensure nothing gets cut or hit as people are digging in the ground. So. We're also very involved in the community. This is just a sampling of many of the things that we're involved in and where our staff and our team gives back to the community to take a part in the active role within the community. One of the items I had shared at our last update was that we had used some of the money that we had been able to amass from billings to our customers to upgrade some core equipment on our backbone. And so we had just made the purchase the last time I was here. I'm happy to report that we have implemented that backbone upgrade, and it allows us to provide better service to our larger enterprise customers. So In summary, Serban is a fiber optic network, and we also provide some wireless network as well to some of the communities we serve. We have high speeds at affordable prices, and it is an economic tool for many of the communities we serve because many of the municipalities we're in leverage the Serban network as a selling point for their community to have access to a network like that in rural Illinois. The other item I'd like to talk about briefly is Giganomics. It's an item that I know Councilman McCarthy likes to hear about, but it's how some of the communities used Serban, and I'd like to use the town of Normal as an example. Normal readily recognized that there was broadband access was not available in Northeast Normal, and with the expansion with the Distill Brewery out there, Distill signed up for Serban services. And they had a great opening. I think many of you were all there. And Matt gave us a really nice recommendation and quote about what it means to have Serban service powering the internet demands that they have at their facility there. So appreciate that. I also want to talk briefly about what exactly are the services that we provide to the town, just to give you a better example of that. Currently, the town is under contract for 444 meg of symmetric internet access. It includes a bandwidth credit for the co-location access you give us, and I'll explain that in a minute. You also have 1 gig of symmetric intranet or transport access between 16 different sites. And I have just a quick listing of the sites so you can see all of the different locations where we're providing service to the town. And there are 2 service locations that will be coming on soon. One is the fire department headquarters, the new headquarters. The handhole was placed as part of the construction project just last week, and the boring is scheduled to start tomorrow to take the fiber optic line into the new fire department headquarters. So that should be done within the next week or 2 weeks. The other thing was the Uptown Wireless project that the town council approved not that long ago. We have been setting up some demo equipment for testing purposes, and next week, probably around Wednesday or Thursday, the boring will start because all of the wireless access points that will be located throughout Uptown Normal will have a wired backhaul, which is different than the way it's set up now, where it's all wireless backhaul. So that eats up some of the channel bandwidth between all the access points. So it's one of the upgrades that will be with the new system. So we're pretty excited about that. I referenced the co-location agreement. When the grant team built out Serban, one of the things they were very focused on was trying to control costs, which would allow them to use the funding they had to reach more customers. So they went to many communities and said, hey, we need co-location space. We need a spot where we can put some equipment in a facility where it's got generator, power backup, on-site fuel storage, things like that. These POP sites, point of presence sites, throughout central Illinois help create our redundancy. So the town granted Serban access to the current fire department headquarters on College Avenue, and we have a rack of equipment located there, which is on the generator backup and everything else. And so in lieu of giving us an easement in perpetuity for that site, you received a credit allocation on your account, much like all of the other. It wasn't anything special just for the town. Any municipality or entity that provided that to us throughout our network received an extra bandwidth credit allocation for that. I mentioned you guys are a member of the entity. You're one of the founding members, and you're active in the governance with Mark being on the board. And then additionally, Serban receives payroll services from the town, and then we get an invoice each month from the town finance department and reimburse the town for those services. So I'd open it up for any questions that anyone might have.
Questions for Mark? Mr. McCarthy is over there smiling, so
Oh, you're gonna have them
Go.
define Giganomics, but I'm just messing with it. Thanks. Great update.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
thanks, Mark. I think I didn't see any questions.
Well, thank you for your time and allowing me to present tonight.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your work, Mark.
We do have a request to adjourn to executive session. Before taking that motion, are there concerns or comments? I would entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session under section, yep, sorry.
Just one comment real quick. I wouldn't want it to go without saying, there's always an excitement around Normal this time of year, and I wanted to say welcome back to all those who are back at school at ISU and elsewhere around the community. We're glad to have you back.
Thanks, Scott. Entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session under section 2C3 of the Open Meetings Act concerning the selection of a public official.
So moved, second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Cummings?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. We are adjourned to executive session. Thank you.